Hi there. Today I'm taking a look at a Chianti. Nothing special in terms of that it's not a Chianti Classico, it's not a Reserva. This is a DOCG Chianti, the Castiglioni from Marchesi Frescobaldi. This is a 2019 vintage. The estate Castiglioni is where the Frescobaldi family first lived, even before they were producing wine. In about the 11th century they had this estate. It's a hilltop estate, and then 700 years ago they started producing wine there. Chianti, very classic Sangiovese blend normally, from the region around Florence and Siena in Tuscany. This particular estate is about 10 kilometres west of Florence. The site here is actually, the Frescobaldis use this mainly to grow Bordeaux varieties. They make a couple of IGT Toscanas, one that's predominantly Merlot with some Sangiovese, and another that is Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc and Sangiovese. So this, which is a blend of predominantly Sangiovese with a little tiny touch of Merlot just to round it out a bit and soften the end, is their entry-level wine for this estate. It sells normally for somewhere below $15 if you're talking in US money here. The Frescobaldis, as I say, have been making wine for centuries in Tuscany. They now have 7 estates in most of the classic regions of Tuscany. But this was where it all started, and the soils here are quite clayey soils, so not soils that are really not predominantly suited to producing sort of intense, deep, rich, high-class wine. So being used to make an everyday drinkable wine, presumably. The wine itself spends 6 months aging. It's fermented and aged in stainless steel tanks, and then they let it mature for a month in bottle before they release it. Obviously this is a 2019, we're now in 2022, so it's had a little more time aging in bottle, but it's a wine that's meant to be drunk young and fresh. So let's see if it's achieving that. First of all, let's have a look at the colour. It's a medium ruby red. There's no great density to it. I can see through it quite happily. There isn't really much of a purple hue to it. It loses a little colour to the rim. The pigmentation is a fairly dark red, but it's not particularly intense. And the aromas. The aromas are relatively restrained. It's not an expensive wine, but actually they're really quite pure. I'm getting a cherry aroma, and it's not a simple bursting fruit aroma. It's got some complexity, but I'm looking, there is a tiny lifted perfume to it, which is lovely, but there seems to be a slight woody note, and yet I'm looking for oak, and I know that this wine hasn't been oaked, so that's obviously an element of the tannins or something coming from the fruit there. So not oak, but more of a sort of a I suppose it's some sort of grainy wood note. I don't know. Let's have a taste. The wine's medium to lightweight, but it does have structure. There's tannic grip there. In fact, it's quite drying. There's a sort of a slightly chalky astringency to it, and some grainy notes as well. But behind that, there's a nice red cherry, maybe Morello cherry, sort of a bit of depth, heading through almost into a black fruit note. And once you've come past the tannins, there's a freshness on the finish that means the wine lasts fairly well. There's no huge weight. There's no great complexity. It's quite straightforward. Once you've tasted the flavours, they're not particularly developing. And I would reckon that a 2019 is probably it's probably drinking at its optimum. It's not really going to be worth keeping this more than a year or two. It's not going to go downhill at any speed, but what you've got here is a wine, though, where you've got that sort of fresh acidity and lovely tannins, and they're counterpointing each other, and that's going to make it a great match for foods, proteins in particular, sort of beef and that sort of thing, where it can cut through to the flavours. And there's that sort of, I was talking about sort of grainy woodiness there. It's a sort of a, probably more a spice. It's not really quite a pepper note, but maybe a nutmeggy aroma that would complement things like that really quite nicely. So a simple, pleasant drink that does what you do expect of it. So that's Frescobaldi's Castiglioni Chianti 2019. Thank you for watching. Bye now.